The snow fell in slow, deliberate flakes, each one settling upon the station bench like a small, cold blessing. Red Hawk hugged her shawl tighter around her shoulders, though it offered little against the biting wind. At 22, she carried herself with a quiet dignity, yet beneath it, a fragile ache lingered. The townsfolk had made their judgment long before she arrived. Too young, too foreign, too unlikely to tend a hearth as they desired. She had come seeking work as a cook, a chance to live with purpose, yet doors had closed with polite firmness, whispers trailing behind her like a shadow. Her fingers, numb from the cold, traced the worn leather of her satchel, as if touching it might ground her in a reality that otherwise felt ephemeral. "They won't hire me, not here, not anywhere," she murmured to the wind, her voice barely more than a shiver. The station platform stretched ahead, silent but for the distant clatter of iron wheels and the occasional bark of a dog. Snow muffled the world, giving her a moment of solitude, but it also amplified her isolation. Each rejected plea had left a faint, lingering echo of shame. She lowered her gaze, tracing a frozen rivulet along the edge of the platform with the tip of her boot. In the hush, the gossip of the town seemed almost tangible. "She can't keep a kitchen warm. Who would trust her with a hearth?" Even the children avoided her eyes, sensing a story they were too young to comprehend. Yet, beneath her worry, a stubborn ember of pride persisted. Elle straightened, lifted her chin against the wind, and breathed in the sharp scent of pine smoke drifting from the nearby cottages. She was more than their gossip, more than the judgments that lingered like frost on the edges of the world. Her eyes, dark and reflective, scanned the empty tracks, wondering if hope might arrive on the next train. She imagined the life she might have: warm fires, the clatter of pots, the simple satisfaction of creating sustenance for someone who appreciated it, but each vision felt just out of reach. The sound of boots on snow made her look up. He was there before she could place him. A tall man, coat dusted with frost, eyes like winter sky, scanning the horizon with careful attention. Gideon McCall, the cowboy whose name traveled in whispers across the town, carried himself with a quiet authority, not in the way of those who ruled with words, but of someone who commanded presence simply by being. His gaze fell upon her, and though he said nothing, the silence carried weight. The world seemed to contract in that instant, the cold wind blunting its edge as he approached. Elle's pulse quickened, not with fear but with the careful, tentative curiosity of someone who had long been overlooked. He halted a few paces away, boots crunching softly, hands tucked into the pockets of a well-worn coat. For a moment, he simply watched her, as if measuring the depth of her exhaustion, the resilience that shone faintly beneath it. Then his voice, low and deliberate, cut through the hush of snowfall. "Pick your things and come." The simplicity of the words startled her. Not a command, not a question, an invitation wrapped in quiet certainty. Her breath caught, forming a pale cloud in the frigid air. She wanted to ask for clarification, to doubt the kindness, to retreat back into the familiar sting of rejection, but something in his gaze held her steady. It was not pity, nor was it expectation. It was recognition. In that instant, the world beyond the snow-dusted platform fell away, leaving only the space between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Her mind raced. She thought of the long nights alone, of the cold hearths she had left behind, of the meals she had cooked for strangers who never lingered. Could she trust this stranger? Could she believe that someone might value her, truly, for all that she carried within? The snow swirled around her, each flake a fleeting reminder of time slipping by, and with it, the chance to step forward. Elle drew a deep breath, the cold burning her lungs, and slowly, with hands that trembled but were unbowed, she reached for her satchel. Gideon's presence was steady, grounding. He offered no words of reassurance beyond that initial invitation, yet the quiet was itself comforting. He moved aside, gesturing toward the wagon waiting by the tracks, its wheels dusted with snow, the horses stamping impatiently but obediently. She lifted her bag, feeling its weight as if it contained not only her belongings but the sum of her hopes and fears. Each step toward him was a small rebellion against the whispering town, a refusal to accept their judgment as truth. The first touch of his hand on the wagon rail was gentle, almost deferential, and in that simple act, Elle sensed the enormity of what was unfolding. No grand declarations, no sweeping gestures, just a quiet acknowledgment that she belonged somewhere, at last. She climbed into the wagon, the horse's warmth radiating beneath the heavy blankets Gideon had already laid. The reins were firm in his hands, guiding them along the snow-laden path, and she realized she was holding her breath, not out of fear, but in anticipation of a life finally within reach. Snow fell heavier as they moved away from the station, blanketing the town and its gossip in white silence. Elle stole a glance back once, seeing the platform recede, the whispers of rejection dissolving with the snow. In its place, a new landscape unfolded, wide and unbroken, filled with the quiet promise of home. The wind tugged at her shawl, brushing against her cheeks like a reminder of all she had endured, and yet, in the company of this steadfast man, the world felt less formidable. For Gideon, the silence between them was a revelation in itself. He had lived among the vast plains and rugged ranges, accustomed to solitude, to the endless stretch of sky reflecting back one's own thoughts. Yet in Elle, he recognized a quiet courage that mirrored his own, a resilience honed in the face of life's indifference. There was a grace in her manner, an unspoken insistence on dignity, and it drew him to her in ways he had not anticipated. The snow swirled around them, and for a brief, shimmering moment, the winter landscape seemed to hold its breath along with them, suspended between what had been and what was yet to come. As the wagon trundled over the frost-crusted road, Elle allowed herself a small, cautious smile. Not a smile of certainty, for life was rarely so generous, but a smile born of choice. She had chosen to move forward, to leave behind the cold judgment of the town and step into the warmth of possibility. Each mile carried her further from rejection and closer to a life she had only dared to imagine. The horse's rhythmic steps became a quiet anthem, a steady heartbeat beneath the hush of snow, guiding them toward a horizon that promised more than mere survival. When the first lights of the McCall ranch appeared through the curtain of falling snow, Elle felt an unfamiliar weight lift from her chest. There was work to be done, meals to be prepared, chores to attend, yet the burden of shame and doubt had begun to dissipate. In its place grew a sense of quiet hope, fragile but undeniable, threaded through each gesture, each glance, each small act of shared humanity. She knew the road ahead would not be without challenges, that the town's whispers might yet find her, that life demanded resilience. But in the company of this man who saw her, not as a tool, not as a curiosity, but as a person, she felt the stirrings of a peace she had never known. That evening, as the first embers glowed in the hearth, and the wind rattled the roof like a distant applause, Elle allowed herself to rest. Her hands were warm from stirring the pot, from folding blankets, from reaching for the small acts of grace that would define her days here. Gideon worked silently beside her, his presence a quiet reassurance, a promise unspoken yet profound. In the stillness of the snow-blanketed ranch, the world contracted to the simple truth that two solitary souls could meet, recognize each other's worth, and begin to craft a life from the fragments of hope. And in that silence there was a lesson, faint but luminous. Sometimes the world turns its back, but a single hand extended in quiet faith can guide you home. Elle felt it in the warmth of the hearth, in the strength of her own heartbeat, in the steady glance of the man who had chosen to see her. The snow continued to fall, indifferent and unhurried, yet she knew that for the first time in years, she was moving toward something larger than fear, toward a life that might be filled with peace and love.